And I have the pleasure of introducing a gentleman that you know very well, Monsieur Ken Cuquier.
Thanks, Juliette.
Thank you so much for allowing me to ask you questions this time around. So I'm very curious, in terms of your experience as a human being as well as a journalist and somebody who is such a big part of this conversation, the idea that there are millions of people that are being affected by data that aren't necessarily part of the conversation is troublesome to some, and others are like, well, why should they be? It's your job, in fact, to tell stories, right? To tell stories of what's going on and in a way that people can understand. Do you feel that you have a responsibility to be able to tell the story to more people versus the usual suspects? And if so, how do you even begin to do that, given the constraints that you live under?
That's a very good question. I think the answer is a bit more subtle. I think that I write for, my primary place where I write is for an audience that is not part of that, those billions who are affected but have no voice in this. Mm-hmm. So automatically it's not that my words, unless I really stretch myself to do it, is going to reach down to those. So the subtlety is this, that what I can do is I can help frame the debate at that other level for things that they otherwise wouldn't know. So an example would be, many people will talk about data and what's going on with big data, and many people will say that, well, the big problem is privacy. Well, I don't think that's true.
Right.
Right? I think that privacy is still a very big issue, but there's another problem that no one's just talking about. I want to start framing that debate, and the debate is propensity, that we're going to have algorithms predicting our behavior in the future.
We have it now.
Well, that's precisely right. We have it now, but there's a subtlety. The way we have it now is we have a FICO score, and it predicts our likelihood to repay a loan, and so we have higher interest rates when our score is different than having lower interest rates, and that's based on small data. And it's also based on information that's quantifiable. There's an explicit rule set that you can look at, and if you don't like your FICO score, you can call FICO and say, what's the problem? Right? But in the world of big data, we're going to be making decisions about people. It's going to look like Minority Report, where we're not.
But who is we? We're going to be making decisions.
Society is going to be doing it. It's going to be all institutions throughout society. And it'll look like Minority Report, where we're going to be making decisions about people pre-crime, in the case of Minority Report, and taking action against them, not because of what they did, but because their likelihood to do something. So the debate shifts. It's not there's a new worry. It's not the same thing. So if the economists can move that debate forward by saying, yes, privacy is still a problem, but it's not the central problem. Now the problem is one's propensity and the degree to which human volition should remain sacrosanct. That's something that I can do and that I will be doing.
All right, we're all going to keep our eyes on you to make sure that you do that. It's a pleasure to actually speak to you because you're speaking from a place of knowledge. You've also lived in Asia. I think many of us who talk about these things do it from a very limited perspective, at least culturally. And it's fascinating when you really start to get a global conversation around this from different tiers of people. And so I'm curious, again, in terms of your work with The Economist, how you plan to potentially tap into all of that wisdom, all of these different experiences. There's this notion that there's a possibility of getting more eyeballs to the task. And there's a possibility for corporate, who is essentially the main reader, the main participant in the Economist conversation, to really reap the benefits of all of that work, all of those eyeballs, all those people around the world who could potentially be doing the work for corporate and government for free because they believe in it, because they want to. Where is the line in your mind?
Well, I'll step forward and say that I think the ability of communication technologies to disaggregate work and bring it to the billions around the world, and then to reaggregate it, is probably good. When historians look back at this period, they might actually say it's the most important shift in society. It will turn people into knowledge workers that could otherwise have to have been manual laborers, regardless of their skills, right? And that was absolutely the case 100 years ago. You took the brightest guy in Bangalore, right? If he was born of the wrong caste, forget about it. And this is, I recognize this is somewhat of a cliche, it's been said before.
Right.
But that,
I mean, 50 years ago, I would never have been on this stage.
That's exactly right.
There's no way. There's no way.
50 years ago, I wouldn't have either. There's, now the social mobility and the societal mobility moves in both directions. Mm-hmm. So just as Britain and France had to understand the end of empire at the end of World War II, the ultimate question is going to be what it means, and we're seeing a Russia that has had to understand a new position in the world, and in a very uncomfortable way over the last 2 decades. What is it going to mean for the West broadly when it's the rise of Asia and Asian economies? What is it going to mean for the United States? One temporary answer is going to be that to think of these big entities are a vestige of a system that no longer exists, of small data, of lack of coordination costs, et cetera. It makes no sense to talk about America. There's no America. Mm-hmm. There's the Rust Belt of Detroit, right? And there's Silicon Valley, where life is always green, and we're in clover. And we're going to have to rethink the way our political institutions work, because we are going to have to, if you will, disaggregate down to the most appropriate scale. In this case, it's going to have to be probably the municipality rather than the nation.
Right, and again, corporate is a big part of that. But in many cases, there's the issue of trust. There's the issue of transparency. And again, as the storyteller, I believe that potential is in your hands. So how do you navigate that?
Always imperfectly.
Good answer. Very, very good answer. I know that we're almost out of time.
It's built on years of mistakes.
All right. Well, for those of us who are looking forward to being able to tell those stories, do you have any words of advice? I mean, hopefully, this is being recorded. This will be on the internet. More and more people will get a chance to see this, and will be sitting in their homes and thinking, wow, I want to participate in this conversation. How can I do it? What do I do? What kind of stories can I tell to educate myself, to educate my peers, to get more involved? What would you recommend?
The tools are there. It's really just about one's initiative. There's far fewer things holding people back. It's very interesting. Initially, I didn't have an answer, but actually I do, and it's one that I've just been thinking about in the last few days. About 4 days ago, I was staying with a former colleague of The Economist, Frances Cairncross at Oxford, and on her bookshelf one evening, I picked up a strange book, and I saw the correspondence between a writer between the 1940s and 60s in North America and a London bookstore. It's called 84 Charing Cross Road. And in it, they thank her for sending a ham for Christmas in 1950. And they explain that, we still have rations, and we can't, and so we're limited, we're rationed to 1 egg per month. So this has been a great delight for us to have. And you can't help but read this and think, oh my God, in 1950, Londoners were rationed to 1 egg a month? And you think, I can't help but now look at people of Britain who are over 70 and just think, what debt do I owe these people? My point to answer the question is that and then also, just as an aside, I do remember the first few hours and first few days of my reporting after the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear meltdown in Japan, and thinking, this is fun. I was in a car going to Fukushima and thinking, I really want to write about big data right now. What the hell am I doing in this car? And where am I headed? And what's going to happen? Because I was the Japan business correspondent. The amazing thing is that there's so fewer impediments today for anyone to make a mark. The tools are there, so it's really just about one's initiative. And you couldn't have said that at other times of history.
It's all about who you surround yourself as well.
That's right. That's right.
Well, you're good company. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Juliette. This is great. Thank you.